Prabhu's comment. I mean, I'm aware of that. I mean, we are all aware of that. These are not, we are not taking binary positions ourselves. We are not saying that these conversations should not go on. I mean, there's always a conversation between untruths and truths, and there's always a conversation between myths and facts, and myths and history, and so on and so forth. As far as the Sonauli thing is concerned, I mean, in fact, I just read today an excerpt from a very big article which has appeared in the Caravan of 1st January 2025, which has rubbished their claims, but I'm going to read that article. I've still not read it. So, I mean, when the conversation will happen, we are willing to be self-reflexive. Are they willing to be self-reflexive? No. They don't want to converse, they want to impose. A conversation can take place between two people only on an equal plane, when one does not want to dominate and obliterate the other. This is not a dialogue. They're not interested in your self-reflexivity. See, when we criticize colonial historiography, or when we criticize the German school of history produced by Ranke, we criticize that school for having produced historians who are not self-reflexive. Self-reflexivity does not mean that you put an end to the discipline itself. It should not be suicide. Self-reflexivity only means that you actually critically see all the sources, secondary, primary, archaeological, whatever. But then there's a method which we follow in criticism also. If somebody is not interested in that at all, how do you converse? It's not as if, see, India was always a country, a land of multiple. I mean, that's the whole argument in the polyphony of Panipat I discussed. There are so many sources. But the student in the school or the colleges is conditioned to believe one narrative. And now more so, because the spaces for multiple narratives in the earlier books, you had this very brilliant themed in history series, Niladri Bhattacharya and other people hated that, which is now being taken off. Instead, you are getting fake histories in that place. They were open to conversations. The older NCRT books were open to conversations. They always said that there are multiple interpretations. Nobody said that this is the only interpretation and this should be imposed on those who don't believe in these things. So it's not, and Marxist historiography does not mean Stalinist historiography. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. So, reflexive, you have raised a very important point. But when you say primary source, why should I consider a Bakar more primary than Kashiraj Pandit's account of the Panipat battle? He said they started calling me Subedar. Now Subedar is the nickname of Malhar Raoji Holkar. He is known as Subedar in the Marathi sources. Now there is a source, the authenticity of which is debated. It's called Holkaranchi Thai, which is a letter of apology letter of explanation, self-explanation, apparently written by Malhar Raoji Holkar, some months after the Battle of Panipat, explaining his conduct on the field on 14 January 1761 to the Peshwa, in which he presents a different perspective of the Battle of Panipat, in which he very clearly says that Sadashiv Rao Bhau was not amenable to any kind of reasoning. He had become very arrogant. I mean, of course, there's an entire thing I've used that in my hand. So you have multiple sources. You have Mughal sources. You have Persian sources. You have Ziyarul Mutharin, which is a different source altogether, which is of course written many years after the. So we have to judge whether the source is is it contemporaneous or not. When was it written? All these things we do deal with. But when we want to converse with those people who want to impose a political will on history writing, how will a conversation progress? Tomorrow they will say, see, you talked about one kind of science. Okay, there may be many kinds of sciences. There may be some truth in yoga, there may be some truth in Ayurveda, some truth in Unani, some truth in allopathy. Allopathy is not all bad. But if you start promoting superstition. In the name of these so-called truths, you hide behind those truths and you say, "Nee, ye Baba ne kaha hai, ye Radhe Ma ne kaha hai, ye Falana ne kaha hai." I mean, how the hell do you argue with these people? Tomorrow they'll say, "ये डॉक्टरी बेकार है, डॉक्टरी मत बनो, ये तो तुमको पैसे लूट लेते हैं, वो फलाना, ये सब तो हो रहा है." And the lots of people are dying because of these things, they go to these quacks and so on and so forth. They will say, "ये भी मेरा truth है." That's where postmodernism is doing all kinds of damage. It was promoted in the US universities to destroy the academic freedom and academic atmosphere in the US universities after 1968 by Kissinger and Nixon. And the CIA was made complicit in this. This is proved in Henry Heller's book on the capitalist university. He wrote that whole book. This postmodernism is not something very innocent. It has a political project behind it. This is something about which Ranveer Singh writes in that book on Oakshott. This is way back in the 870s he's writing. So we have to be very careful about what we are saying. One is not saying सुलहकुल है, ठीक है, सुलहकुल होना चाहिए, दूसरे को भी तो मानना चाहिए. हम ही मानते रहेंगे उनकी बात. In that case, we'll be left with no choice but to say, okay, let there be a rational interpretation. But are they interested in the rational interpretation? You're talking of conversation, Prabhu, but conversing with whom? So we are agreed that we want to converse. We are already conversing, otherwise this conversation won't take place. Yeah, problem.